A man comes home and his wife is waiting at the door and says, I'm sick of you. I hate your guts. I want you to move out right now. He goes into the bedroom, he packs his bag, and he's on his way out. And he says, is there anything else? She says, yes, I want you to die a slow, painful death. And he says, oh, you want me to stay? Now, you see, I can start a Yiska sermon with that. Many of us might feel this way at times, but I don't know.
Rabbi Mitchell Wohlberg served as spiritual leader of the Beth Tfiloh Congregation in Baltimore, Maryland for 44 years. The master of the sermon, Rabbi Wohlberg is famous for his inspiring and insightful sermons read by thousands the world over. While sometimes outspoken,
the only time any people walked out was when I attacked Trump. And I said, I see there are some people who are walking out, gay, gesundte hate. But they came back.
Rabbi Wohlberg is also renowned for his warmth, his humor, and his extraordinary pastoral concern for the members of his congregation.
If you were sick, before you were admitted to the hospital, I was already there to visit you. At the time of death, I wrote a eulogy as if I had lived in the person's bedroom all my life.
A consummate professional, Rabbi Wohlberg commits to writing beforehand everything he's going to say in the sermon.
Every single word that I am going to speak, every sermon, every bar and bat mitzvah charge, every wedding address, every funeral, every single word.
But even though his sermon is scripted, he skillfully delivers it in a way that makes everyone in the room feel connected to him.
But I personally, when I deliver the sermon, feel like I am talking in my living room.
In this engaging episode of the Maggid method, Rabbi Wohlberg gives us a rare glimpse into his role models growing up.
Your father was a rabbi as well?
My father not only was a rabbi, he was a professor of homiletics at Yeshiva University. He taught rabbis how to speak.
His early days in the rabbinate.
My first position was a rabbi in New Bedford, Massachusetts. I was 23 years old. I'm there 2 days and the phone rings. It's a funeral home. A member of my synagogue, they tell me, has passed away. I've never been to a funeral. What happens at a funeral? I was nervous speaking in front of a dead body.
And yes, we even discuss his penchant for sports cars that has earned him some notoriety over the years.
I drove Maseratis and Thunderbirds and Lexus 500s, and my cars was something that people talked about. I'm sure some negatively, but I was real.
While he may seem larger than life from behind the pulpit, Rabbi Wohlberg's congregants know that really he's a down-to-earth, relatable, and caring friend that understands them, and that is the secret of his success.
They come to me to discuss personal issues in my office, and the first thing I say to them is, that guy in the Beamer and me have very little in common. He knows everything. I struggle with all the issues that he's talking about.
I learned so much from my conversation with Rabbi Mitchell Wohlberg, and I'm sure you will too. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Mitchell Wohlberg.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am fine. Who are you?
You asked me that the last time we spoke.
I got it. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm yours.
Yeah, okay. So in preparation for this, I watched your last sermon. Recorded. I'm assuming you didn't record it on Shabbos, if that's...
No, you don't.
So you talked over there about reasons for leaving, stepping down a couple of years ago. And one of them was that you were afraid that you were ceasing to be relevant. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
It's interesting, when I was thinking about what we would be discussing in my sermons, the first word that came to mind was relevant. I always tried to make the sermon relevant. I wanted the people to be interested in what I was talking about, and I wanted to show how Torah and Talmud was relevant to them today and spoke to today's world events. So there was no subject that I wouldn't touch upon. And I wanted every sermon people to walk out and say, wow, I didn't know that. I'm going to have to think about that. And it could be everything from DEI to Israel to Soviet Jewry to transgender. There was no subject that was off the record. In fact, I strive to find subjects to keep it relevant. And people also knew that I'm pretty centrist in my thinking, so they didn't always know what to expect and what my approach would be. And they came to find out. Relevance was crucially important. I speak now once a month as the rabbi in residence. Last week, I spoke about the person of the year, Taylor Swift, and how I know nothing about her and I have nothing in common with her. And I said in the sermon, now I'm a fan of AC/DC and Guns N' Roses. And my people, they love that. And then I spoke who my person of the year were, the women of Israel. And I told stories about how they were at the forefront in spotting what was going on in Gaza, but nobody listened to them, and how they drove the tanks. The other day, the New York Times had a front page article on women in Israel and fighting forces and how unique that was. I was relevant. I spoke about Trump, and I spoke about Biden, and I spoke about Obama, and I told people how I felt. But within a Torah context. Now, of course, you can make a Torah context work whichever way you want, more or less. But it had to be within a Torah context. They were not coming to shul to hear Walter Cronkite. They wanted to hear their rabbi's perspective. And that was always fun. And it worked.
Yeah. How did you decide what to speak about on a week-to-week basis? What was the thought process that went behind it? Did it have to relate to the parsha? Was it something that was burning in your heart that you felt you had to talk about?
First, I would say to you, you can make the parsha relate to anything. All right. On the other hand, sometimes you have a great piece of Torah that you want to use, and you try and find something going on that you can connect to it. The next time I speak is Parshat Pekudei. So there in Pekudei, there's a nice Devar Torah that they didn't trust Moshe. Of course, they said maybe he's stealing the money. That's why he had to give this whole reckoning in Pekudei. So there I have a piece of Torah. I might speak about trust, and can we trust our leaders today and the problem of trust in our country? Or there's another piece of Torah that the hooks started ringing, and that made up for the difference in money and how important the hooks are. And the hooks are called Vavim, and the letter Vav. That's another piece of Torah that I'm playing with. And how can we be all hooked together, no matter what pillars we have, if we're not hooked together as Jews? So you see, it's a mixture of either I got a good piece of Torah that I'm going to find something relevant, or there's something going on that I have to speak about. The war in Israel, it's almost impossible to speak about something that has no connection to that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that makes up a good deal of sermon material these days. And again, there's always something in the Sedra that you can make work for it. With now it's going to be, excuse me, Bo and Beshalach and Amalek and fighting Paro and hardening his heart. And then there's going to be the laws in Mishpatim and an eye for an eye and disproportional. Every Sedra has something to speak to, some aspect of the war today.
Yeah. One of the things you said in that sermon struck me as very interesting, which was that you said that you have a hard time turning your mind off because you're always thinking about the next sermon, the next material.
That's almost the problem. The mind is constantly worrying. Now that I'm rabbi in residence, it's a little bit, but look, I'm talking to you about a sermon in Pekudei. And where are we now? Bo B'Shalach. So you see.
Yeah. Yeah. How much do you recycle from years past or try to come up with new ideas?
I'm working on a sermon, most probably for the high holidays. We've been looking back on certain sermons. Almost every subject we're talking about today, I talked about 20 years ago. The reaction of the world to the onslaught in Gaza. I have from a sermon in 2015, how the world condemned Israel's onslaught. I mean, word for word. Today, a big topic is shoplifting. You go into drugstores, they have everything behind glass because people are shoplifting. I have a sermon from 1982 on the problems we're facing with shoplifting. I have a sermon about cancel culture that I gave in 2000. So you can't help but recycle, because in some way, the more things change, the more they remain the same. But we're living in a different world today than the world I grew up in. There's no question about it. But I also saw, it might have been the Skver Rebbe who banned the use of artificial intelligence. So I have a sermon when the Rebbe banned smartphones. And I have a sermon when the Rebbe banned computers. And you would think that the Rebbes would know by now. Nobody's listening to them. So when you say recycle, and sometimes you recycle a good piece of Torah, that's always. I prepared a Parsha preview for the Sedra of Beshalach, where it says, and Paro drew near, Paro hikriv. And Chazal interpret that, not that he caused to draw near. And then that with Paro attacking, he drew the people closer together more than all of the Nevi'im and anybody had ever done. And how now we're going through that, we're being drawn together because of the attack from Hamas. But how long will it last? It didn't last long after Kriyas Yamsuf. So there's using what I'll call an old piece of Torah that I've used before, but in a different context.
Got it. So I was reading through some of your sermons. Clearly, you have some strong views, and I'm wondering, you have an audience that appreciates you as the rabbi, but I would imagine in such a large group, there's got to be some divergent opinions. What kind of storm do you cause when you get up there and you say some strong opinions that people don't agree with? And what is the fallout? What are some of the consequences?
I had one, I've spoken about every president. I mean, sermons about Clinton and immorality and Bush and Obama was certainly not one of my favorites, and that came out in sermons. The only time any people walked out was when I attacked Trump, which tells you something. And I had some people who walked out. And I said, I see there are some people who are walking out. Gay, gesundte hate. But they came back. But generally speaking, even if they didn't agree, they knew where I was coming from.
You had that trust. You built up that trust.
Yes. They knew that there were, and they also knew that there were times when, and I've given sermons on how I'm liberal and I'm conservative. On this, I'm liberal. On this, I'm conservative. So that developed trust. The one thing that people knew about me, I am pro-Israel, and my sermons always strongly reflected that. Not what I'll call Meshuggah pro-Israel. I condemned settler violence. I disagreed with Netanyahu speaking to the America's Congress. But otherwise, and Beth Tfiloh, my synagogue, is the leading seller of Israel bonds and high holiday appeals down through the years. And that's because my sermons always, and much of the leadership from AIPAC and in the Federation here in Israel bonds comes from our synagogue because Israel was the constant. No J Street stuff for me.
Yeah.
And they knew it. And a couple of people didn't like it. Okay. Everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Yeah. Including you.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you go about structuring a drasha, a
Now,
sermon.
I just want to add something over here.
Yeah.
A lot of that trust and acceptance, there's another, the sermon, how should I phrase this? It's what I'm most known for. Wohlberg sermon. But there was another part of my rabbinate, and that was the pastoral side. If you were sick, before you were admitted to the hospital, I was already there to visit you. At the time of death, I wrote a eulogy as if I had lived in the person's bedroom all my life. I mean, I researched the eulogy like I researched the sermon. And I had a very close connection. Bar mitzvahs, my address to a bar mitzvah. I work as hard on an address to a bar mitzvah, on a wedding address, as many rabbis work on a sermon. I once officiated at a wedding with another rabbi, a well-known rabbi, and 15 minutes before the wedding, he says to me, tell me something about the groom's side and the groom. 15 minutes before, we're standing by the chuppah. I had researched 2 weeks to find out so that I could give a balanced. All right, so when I expressed my opinions in shuls, people liked me. They felt connected to me, and they gave me the right to an opinion. Now, your question.
Yeah. Well, just I guess on the heels of what you're saying, so you wouldn't necessarily have that same grace if you went somewhere else and just started espousing your strong opinions. You're saying you built up the trust through that pastoral.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You don't come in to a shul and give anything. You see, but I was also able to use humor. A lot of my sermons start with humor, just to get them in the mood to hear what else he has to say. And I would say outlandish things. I gave a sermon on transvestites in Judaism. And I gave the halakhic perspective that bein adam lamakom, between man and God, we follow what he was naturally born, between man and his fellow man. And then the question of where do they sit in shul? And if we can't be sure on which side to seat them, sit them on the mechitza. That's the way the congregation reacted.
Yeah.
So you see, after I said that, I can say anything else because they know Wolf is a sensitive guy and a sensible guy, and he doesn't take himself that seriously. That's also something.
Yeah. So tell me how you use humor, because over the years people become more sensitive, and you're always likely to step on somebody's toes. How do you maintain that balance?
I keep saying that I got up just in time because people are much more sensitive, and you have to be careful about everything that you say. During COVID, we had a joint program with some federation, I'm going to say, in the Midwest, and some synagogue in Texas, something like that. And we chipped in, and the 3 interviewed Shira Haas, the star of Unorthodox. You know what I mean?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
We met with her beforehand on Zoom just to go over. And I kibitzed with her, and I said, are you married? She's an adorable woman, and da-da-da. She said, well, ask me on the program. Okay. So lo and behold, the program comes, and I asked her, are you married? I don't remember what she answered. I got letters from the head of the federation and from the rabbi in Texas, how their congregants and their contributors were so insulted by by identifying her only in her capacity as a, come on, man, it's killed. No, but I'm talking about real hard letters. And I know even now, kibitzing around, you got to be very careful. And I am known not to be careful. So I find myself saying less than I used to.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah. That's the state of the times.
No question. And I would still be able to say the same things that I've said in the past, but maybe not the same words. I'd have to be more sensitive.
Yeah. So getting back to the structure, how do you say you open with humor sometimes? How do you grab them right in the beginning?
Right at the beginning, the first paragraph is when I aim to grab them. The first paragraph. Come on, everybody, sit up in your seats. Or I can start a sermon. Okay, class, the question for today. And sometimes I take votes in shul. I say, the question for today is, how many of you, and you see, that gets them involved. I did that rather frequently on issues, not kibitzing. But that first paragraph is where I aim to grab them. The last paragraph, and I always had a last paragraph. In other words, I always had an ending, which brought me back to the beginning to show them this was not just disparate ideas or what resonate the most.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So you open strong and you tie it back all together at the end. So what happens in the middle? How do you have a certain
Meat. I serve meat in the middle with the trimmings.
yeah. And how many courses are there?
There's one course of meat, but there could be a lot of trimmings. I can give a lot of examples of the point. And sometimes those examples, Yom Kippur, I spoke about the importance of being nice. Now, that doesn't sound like any, but the examples, each example spoke to different people in the audience. An example with a husband and wife, where the husband said something, and it was one little thing that meant everything to his wife. And an example, I told everybody, I called Johns Hopkins Hospital to make an appointment, and the woman answered the phone and said, "Good morning, Johns Hopkins Hospital. How can I make your day?" And I said to her, "God, I can't believe how you just said." I said, "Can I put you on speakerphone?" She said, "Sure." I said, "Sherry, come in here. I want you to hear something." And I said, "Ma'am, can you please repeat for my wife what you just said?" And she said, "Yeah, hi, Johns Hopkins. How can I make your day?" I said, "Sherry, is that unbelievable?" And she says to the woman on the phone, "You don't know him." So everybody laughs with the you don't know him. But that little, how you can just greet somebody. And then I told a story about somebody who committed suicide off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he left a note and he said, if on my way to commit to the Golden Gate Bridge, somebody says hello to me, I will not jump.
Wow.
Do you see? So those people who don't say hello to someone driving past on Shabbos, or you never know. So those are, so you see, it's one point, but it was the examples. In that same sermon, I said, we all have our secrets that people don't know. And then again, with the examples, some of us are teenagers and we're dealing with our sexuality and so on and so forth. Some of us seem on the outside like successful businessmen, but they don't know we can't pay the mortgage. And some of us are housewives and are saying, is this all there is to life? Each example spoke to somebody else in the shul.
Yeah.
And because of that human nature, which was very much the kinds of sermons I gave, especially like before Yiscah. I see rabbis give a sermon about Israel before Yiscah. Man, wait, I lost you.
I'm here.
Wait, I'm not, hold it. I mean, people are in a certain mood before Yiscah. Speak to where they're at. Speak about parent-child relations. Israel is not for them, but each one of these examples speaks to an element in the congregation. Now, after hearing this, Rabbi Wohlberg, he so understands, he's so smart. And then they come to me to discuss personal issues in my office. And the first thing I say to them is, no, that guy in the bima and me have very little in common. He knows everything. I struggle with all the issues that he's talking about. Makes me human. And that's very different than a lot of other rabbis who want to come across above. Very human.
Yeah.
And I did that in my approach to everything. The cars I drive, everything.
Hey there, event coordinators and program directors. Are you tired of the same old lecture programs that feel more like a snooze fest than a stimulating discussion? Well, have I got news for you. Picture this, an event filled with laughter, inspiration, and invaluable insights straight from the mouths of over 60 congregational leaders. That's right, we're talking about a lecture that dives deep into the art of crafting and delivering sermons, packed with incredible stories, hilarious jokes, and public speaking techniques that I've gleaned from my interviews with over 60 of the best pulpit rabbis and public speakers today. But hold on, this isn't your typical scholar-in-residence affair. No, this is a dynamic fusion of stand-up comedy, Jewish history, and pulpit wisdom from over 60 rabbis that promises to keep the audience engaged from start to finish. So, if you're ready to experience the most inspirational, educational, and downright entertaining lecture you'll attend at your shul, JCC, or other Jewish institution, then you need to email Daniel at maggidmethod.com pronto. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on this opportunity to put on a one-of-a-kind of event. Email Daniel at maggidmethod.com for availability and booking information. This is one program your members won't soon forget. Email Daniel at maggidmethod.com. Daniel at maggidmethod.com. This is one program your members won't soon forget. Now back to the program.
Tell me about the car. For some reason, something sticks out of my mind about a sports car or something like that.
I had a nice car allowance from the synagogue. I drove Maseratis and Thunderbirds and Lexus 500s and that whole bit. Now that I retired and I had trouble getting into sports cars, I bought a yellow Jeep. And people ask me how come I bought it. I said, Because you know how you always spoke about my cars? I said, well, you still do, but at half the price. But my cars was something that people talked about. I'm sure some negatively, but I was real. And I told them how I went to Virginia with my son to hear the Grateful Dead. But it always had a point.
It was intentional. Everything it did was with intention.
Yeah. I write out every single word that I am going to speak. Every sermon, every bar and bat mitzvah charge, every wedding address, every funeral, every single word. And rarely will even change a word when I deliver it.
Do you read from notes?
What?
You read from your notes?
I absolutely. I mean, but it's not notes. It's
a script. It's a script.
Yes, it's a script.
And do you feel at all that maybe you lose something by having to be anchored to that script, maybe not being as present with the audience in front of you?
I don't feel I lose that much. The way I write a sermon is I dictate it into this. Here at home, I have a gorgeous office in shul, but all sermons and stuff is here at home with all of my books and resources and my tape recorder. And when I finish, I then put it into a slot here and forward it to my secretary who types out the sermon. Fortunately, I speak into this the same way I would speak to the audience. So my language and rhythm and almost my accent come across on the page. Yeah, I am reading, but I personally, when I deliver the sermon, feel like I am talking in my living room. And I think the people feel that also, even though I'm reading the script, and also starting off making them feel at home helps with that also. And I think over the years, people admired that I took the time to write out every word. They knew I didn't go into my room after Friday night meal and think of what I'm going to talk about the next day.
You're always prepared.
Always. Always.
Yeah.
I even prepare, certainly in my mind, if I hadn't been invited to speak, but I think there's a possibility they might say, Rabbi Wohlberg, would you like to say a few words? Those occasions I've already given some thought.
You always have something in your back pocket just in case.
Not always, but when I think I might have to.
What are some of your go-to resources when you're looking for Torah content?
Go-to resources.
What do you pull off the shelf first?
The Chumash. What's in the Seder of the week? The calendar. Is it Rosh Chodesh? Is Purim the following because all of that goes into the relevance idea. If I don't have a good piece of Torah, I might go through some books that I have of sermons. By some books, I would say I have about a good 50 books on the Sedra of the week. Everything from Rabbi Soloveitchik's Chumash to Joe Bopker's Yuma in the Sedra, and across the spectrum from Orthodox and non-Orthodox, from Aish and Push and I'll look around, see what's doing, see something that happened to. My father opened up the Medrash. It's not what I do.
Your father was a rabbi as well?
My father not only was a rabbi, he was a professor of homiletics at Yeshiva University. He taught rabbis how to speak. My father was he could interpret a medrash. He was a dynamic speaker in Hebrew and in English and in Yiddish. Shabbos afternoons, his drasha was always in Yiddish.
What era was that? I know because Joseph Lookstein for a while was the...
Yes, he and Joe Lookstein. You mentioned Joe Lookstein. He and Joe Lookstein were part of a generation that used to do unveilings to make $25. Okay? So once he and Joe Lookstein met at a cemetery, they each had an unveiling. And my father said to Lookstein, next time I should see you on a simcha. And Lookstein said to him, what's wrong with this? Yeah, that was that generation. Rackman, Lookstein. But my father was speaking to a more, I don't want to say frummer, Hamish. He wasn't speaking to the east side or the island. He was in Borough Park. So when he started a pasuk, the people finished it. That's why they say, Hazorim Bedima, and you can hear the whole shul say, Varina Yitzhak. He didn't have to translate it into English. My brothers are also rabbis. And my brother Jerry, my older brother, became a rabbi in Merrick, Long Island, where he established the shul. It started with 7 members, and now it's a very prominent modern Orthodox synagogue. He was dealing with the new generation. That showed me I can speak to that generation. I couldn't be a rabbi to my father's generation.
Did you pick up things from him in terms of how you learned how to speak?
Let me just say, at my bar mitzvah talk was in Yiddish. That's what my brothers say. I'm just like my father. I don't, but they mean it in the sense, first of all, that I always have books by my bedside. And I do a lot of research in bed. And when they walked into the house and they see the books, I'm like, that's daddy, that's daddy. And also my father also was always thinking of a good shot. But he had a knowledge of sources that I don't have.
Yeah.
I know the Wall Street Journal better than he did.
What did he think when he'd sit in on some of your sermons? Did he?
What's that?
What was his opinion of your sermons? How did he relate to the way you spoke?
He always told me what he would have said.
That's great.
Yeah, and my father, when he would listen to somebody else, was always thinking about what he would have said.
Right. It's like being a chef in a restaurant, someone else's restaurant, you know.
Yeah, you got it. Exactly.
Yeah. So when young rabbis come to you and like Rabbi Rakovsky and present their sermon as a work in progress, so what kind of things do you steer them towards? What kind of direction do you try to give them?
Relevance. Trying to teach people something they didn't know before. The first paragraph is very important. Have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I don't drag on. Having told you that, on Yisro and Yom Kippur, I could speak close to an hour. But many of the people there were coming for the sermon, not for the avoda. And they wanted to hear. And I had something to say. I wasn't rambling. It was always structured. But like I said before, the beginning, the end, connected, the meat, always. People ask, how long does it take you to write a sermon? By the time I sit down with this, I've thought about it for days, maybe even weeks. And I've gathered information. And I put away papers. I collect. Since the war in Gaza broke out, every time I read something that I say, oh, I can use that someday in a sermon, I cut and paste. It must be 50 pages by now. Their stories, their statements, interesting. So it takes hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. You can't leave. Some people need the pressure of the last minute. I can't do that. But even after I dictate the whole sermon and my secretary types it out, it'll go through another 2-3 revisions. Changing a sentence or word, taking that out, this doesn't work, this is superfluous, da-da-da-da. So it takes a lot of effort. It really does. But it's very important.
Do you think that the importance, the significance of the sermon is the same as it always was? Is it waning? Are people placing less stock on the significance of a sermon these days?
It depends how good the sermon is. If the rabbi has a rep for people come to hear it. If don't, then let's stop and listen quickly. Rabbi Soloveitchik's famous Adam 1 and Adam 2. My people aren't interested in hearing that. I'm not sure I fully understand it. So you have, it depends. Very important, know your audience. Who are you talking to? It feels as if nothing is as important anymore. They don't want to hear a chazan. You don't want to hear a rabbi. You don't want to daven slowly with kavana. That's from people. Non-from want to watch it on Zoom in their bathrobe and make sure the music has a Broadway tune.
Yeah. What about what do you sense about people's attention spans, shrinking attention spans?
I haven't, I wouldn't have anything to say on that. You know, they say with social media, your attention span is not as quickly. I could make an argument for myself. This computer is the most incredible thing imaginable. I can sit 4 or 5 hours in front of this. I was working on a sermon. Let me think about this, or a thought the other way. What was it? Let's say Hashava Saveda. Okay? Where would I find information on Hashava Saveda?
Rabbi Mitchell.
Huh?
Rabbi Mitchell.
Or I have some terrific books. I might go to a Jewish source book, Das Torah, on every subject. Or I might type into Google Hashavas Aveda. It's mind-boggling what you can find. Mind-boggling. So attention span, it has my attention. It's true, every once in a while on the side when I see 7 million views of something from America's Got Talent, I might hit over there for a minute. But it's got my attention. Much of my information now, it comes from the computer. Whether that's good or bad, let some social scientists figure that out. The dangers of social media, I certainly understand. But the source of knowledge, there isn't a subject that's not open to me.
Yeah. What do you think about AI? I saw somewhere where a rabbi had AI write a sermon for him.
Yes, a lot of rabbis have tried that. You see, this is the kind of thing why I explained to the congregation, I stepped down. It's a new generation. There's going to be AI. Whenever something new comes up, there's always somebody banning it. Islam banned the printing press. The Muslim countries used to be the leading countries in wisdom, in knowledge. They banned the printing press. Islam has never recovered. When was the last time they produced Nobel Prize winners? We started printing the Gemara right away. So we use the newest equipment. We're going to be using AI, but I don't know what it is. So you need a new rabbi for a new generation that's dealing with new issues and new perspectives. And kol hakavod.
Yeah. Last question. I'm curious about some of your, besides your father, being a rabbi, some of your other models of influence, inspiration, when you embarked on your speaking career.
Well, I obviously turned to my father and brothers. My first position was a rabbi in New Bedford, Massachusetts. I was 23 years old. There 2 days, and the phone rings. It's a funeral home. A member of my synagogue, they tell me, has passed away, and we make arrangements for me to officiate at the funeral. And I hang up and I said, I've never been to a funeral. What happens at a funeral? So I called my father, and he gave me some ideas. And I called my brother, and he helped me form, a eulogy. And then I was nervous speaking in front of a dead body. So I had my wife lie down on the bed. I don't have to finish the sentence. Two rabbis who have had a very important effect on me and still do is Rabbi Benjamin Blech from Yeshiva University. He was a rabbi in Oceanside, and he was friendly with my brother, but for years I was the Orthodox rabbi at the B'nai B'rith International Leadership Training Conference in Starlight, Pennsylvania. He was the rabbi in YU's Morashah camp. I would go over to him as Benny, and I had a tape recorder. Benny, talk. And whenever I needed a sermon, he helped. And I liked his approach. His approach, although more scholarly because he's brilliant, was also speak to the people, have something to say. Later on, I came across a sermon by a Rabbi, Jack Reamer. Jack Reamer is known in the conservative movement as being one of the great speakers. I came across a sermon of his, which I stole. And I called him. I didn't know him. I never met him or anything. To tell him how mind-boggling the sermon was. And he said, many people have used my sermon. You're the first one to call. And to this day, he's 95 years old. We throw ideas back and forth. So Benny Blech and his books and Jack Reamer, these are two people that I admired, respected. I liked their approach. Neither of them were as political as I might be in a sermon, but darn good. And they speak to the people.
Any secular sources? Any great lecturers, orators that you drew from in terms of your technique or style?
Not orators, but you should know every day I have delivered to my house the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, which I read while I do my bicycle, so on and so forth. And they're a tremendous source of knowledge. They give me subjects to deal with. So I'm getting from them, but a particular, nothing that comes to mind offhand.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you. It just occurred to me you must have a great joke that you love.
I heard one recently that I'm saving. A man comes home and his wife is waiting at the door and says, "I'm sick of you. I hate your guts. I want you to move out right now." He goes into the bedroom, he packs his bag, and he's on his way out, and he says, "Is there anything else?" She says, "Yes, I want you to die a slow, painful death." And he says, "Oh, you want me to stay?" I'm saving that.
That's a keeper. Yeah.
Not bad, not bad. Now, you see, I can start a Yiska sermon with that. But then it goes into, many of us might feel this way at times, but and go from there.
All right. Thank you very much, Rabbi. And
My pleasure. Take care. Thanks.
the Rabbi. Okay. Be well.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. There's a secret that great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now.